My heartless parents abandoned me at Grandma's funeral for a cruise at 14. Now their jaws dropped over my shocking $8.5 million inheritance. My name is Emma Catherine Morrison, and I am 27 years old. What I am about to tell you isn't a story about karma or poetic justice, though both play a role. This is about the moment my father sat in a lawyer's office and realized he'd abandoned his daughter at her grandmother's funeral for a vacation, and that decision had cost him $8.5 million. This is about watching greed destroy itself. Before I tell you about that estate reading, when the lawyer called my name instead of my parents', and Dad's mouth literally fell open in shock, I need to take you back to where it all started. Back to Sacred Heart Church, where my grandmother lay in a casket and my parents checked their watches, more concerned about missing their cruise departure than saying goodbye to the woman who raised me. My grandmother, Rose Margaret Morrison, was the strongest person I ever knew. She'd raised 4 children as a single mother after my grandfather died in a factory accident when my dad was just 12. She worked 2 jobs, a seamstress during the day and cleaning offices at night, to keep food on the table and her kids in school. She never complained, never asked for help, and never showed weakness. By the time I was born, Grandma Rose had retired and was living comfortably in a modest house in Portland, Maine. My parents, Martin and Christine Morrison, lived 20 minutes away with my older sister Amber and me. We visited Grandma every Sunday without fail, and those visits were the highlight of my week. While my parents were obsessed with appearances, status, and money, Grandma Rose cared about character. She taught me to sew, to cook, to balance a checkbook. She told me stories about surviving hardship with dignity. She made me feel valued in ways my parents never did. "You're special, Emma girl," she'd tell me, using her nickname for me. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. You have your grandfather's kindness and my spine. That's a powerful combination." My parents' relationship with Grandma was complicated. Dad resented that she'd never remarried, never pursued wealth, and never given him the privileged upbringing his friends had. Mom looked down on Grandma's simple lifestyle, her secondhand furniture, and her refusal to care about fashion or status. "Your grandmother could have done so much better," Mom said once when I was 12. "She could have married that banker who pursued her, lived in a nice house and given us opportunities, but no, she had to be stubborn and independent. She provided for 4 kids alone," I said. "That's pretty amazing." "It's poverty, Emma, nothing amazing about that." I stopped arguing with Mom about Grandma after that. I just quietly continued my Sunday visits, soaking up every moment with the one person in my family who truly loved me. When I was 14, Grandma was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave her 3 to 6 months. She lasted 4 months, and every day of those 4 months, I was by her side. I'd take the bus to her house after school, do my homework at her bedside, and read to her when she was too weak to hold a book herself. My parents visited occasionally, always briefly, always checking their phones. "You're spending too much time there," Mom complained. "You're 14, you should be with friends, not sitting in a dying woman's house." "She's my grandmother," I said. "And she's not just dying, she's living her last days. I want to be there." "Well, don't expect us to chauffeur you around. If you want to waste your youth playing hospice nurse, that's your choice." Grandma passed away on a Tuesday in November. I was there, holding her hand when she took her last breath. The hospice nurse was there too, along with Grandma's best friend, Margaret, a woman in her 70s who'd been Grandma's neighbor and confidant for 40 years. "You're a good girl, Emma," Grandma whispered in one of her last coherent moments. "Don't let them change you. Promise me." "I promise, Grandma." She smiled, squeezed my hand weakly, and closed her eyes. 2 hours later, she was gone. If you're genuinely enjoying this story, please hit that like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these stories. I called my parents from the hospice. Dad answered. "She's gone," I said, crying. "Grandma died." There was a pause. "We'll handle the arrangements. Come home." "Can you pick me up?" "Emma, we're busy. Take the bus. We'll see you at home." He hung up. I sat in Grandma's room, now just an empty shell without her presence, and cried while Margaret held me. "Your grandmother loved you more than anything," Margaret said softly. "She told me so many times how proud she was of you, how you were the light of her life." "She was mine, too," I whispered. "I know, sweetheart, I know." The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, 4 days after Grandma's death. My parents had it planned down to the minute. Viewing at 10 a.m., service at 11 a.m., burial at noon, reception at 1 p.m. "We need it done by 2 p.m., Mom said when I asked why everything was so rushed. "We have a 4 p.m. flight to catch." I stared at her. "A flight? Where are you going?" "Caribbean cruise," Dad said casually, not even looking up from his laptop. 7 days, all inclusive. We booked it 6 months ago, and it's non-refundable. You're going on a cruise the day of Grandma's funeral? The funeral will be over by then, Mom said, as if this were completely reasonable. We'll pay our respects, attend the service, and then we'll go. Life goes on, Emma. Your grandmother wouldn't want us to cancel our plans. She would absolutely want you to cancel your cruise. I was shouting now, disbelief turning to anger. She just died. You can't just bury her and then go party in the Caribbean. Watch your tone, Dad said sharply. We've already paid $8,000 for this cruise. We're not throwing that money away because of bad timing. Bad timing? She's your mother and she's dead. Mom's voice was cold, final. Being sad won't bring her back. We're going on our cruise and you're staying with Amber for the week. End of discussion. I looked at my sister, who was 17 and had her headphones in, completely checked out of the conversation. She didn't care about Grandma, didn't care about me, didn't care about anything except her phone and her friends. I don't want to stay with Amber, I said. I want to stay with Margaret. Who's Margaret? Dad asked. Grandma's best friend. She offered to let me stay with her. My parents exchanged glances. Fine, Mom said with a shrug. Whatever, as long as we don't have to change our plans. The funeral was exactly as rushed and impersonal as they'd planned. The church was half empty. Grandma had outlived most of her friends, and the ones who remained were elderly and frail. My parents' siblings, 3 uncles and their families attended, all looking vaguely uncomfortable. I sat in the front pew with my parents and Amber. Margaret sat directly behind us. The service was generic, delivered by a priest who'd never met Grandma and kept calling her Ruth instead of Rose. I wanted to scream. This was Grandma Rose, who'd raised 4 children alone, who'd worked herself to exhaustion to provide, who taught me everything that mattered. And she was getting a 30-minute cookie-cutter service because my parents had a cruise to catch. When it came time for family to speak, no one stood up. The priest looked at my father expectantly. Dad checked his watch and shook his head. I'll speak, I said, my voice shaking. I walked to the podium and looked out at the sparse crowd. Then I talked about Grandma Rose for 15 minutes. Her strength, her kindness, her wisdom, her love. I told stories that made people laugh and cry. I honored her the way she deserved. When I finished and returned to my seat, my mother leaned over and whispered, "That was unnecessarily long. We're going to miss our flight." I didn't respond. I just stared straight ahead, hating her. The burial was quick. Grandma was lowered into the ground next to Grandpa, and the priest said a brief prayer. The reception was held in the church basement, featuring sandwiches and coffee that my parents had ordered from the cheapest caterer they could find. At 1:45 p.m., exactly as planned, my parents announced they were leaving. "Emma, Amber's going to drop you at Margaret's house," Mom said, already walking toward the parking lot. "We'll be back in a week. Be good." "You're really leaving?" I couldn't believe it was actually happening right now. "Grandma's in the ground and you're leaving for a vacation. She's dead." "Emma," Dad's voice was irritated now, like I was being unreasonable. "She won't know we're gone. We paid for this trip and we're taking it. You're old enough to understand priorities." "I understand that you care more about a cruise than your own mother," I said. Dad's face flushed red. "You're being dramatic and disrespectful. We'll discuss this when we get back." They left, just walked out of Grandma's funeral reception and drove away to catch their flight to the Caribbean. Amber gave me a ride to Margaret's house 20 minutes later, barely speaking the whole drive. "Sorry about Mom and Dad," she said when we pulled up to Margaret's small bungalow. "They're kind of terrible." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. Margaret Hanson was everything my parents weren't. Warm, present, deeply kind. She welcomed me into her home like I'd always belonged there. "You'll take the guest room," she said, showing me to a cozy bedroom with a quilt-covered bed and lace curtains. "Stay as long as you need, sweetheart. I promised Rose I'd look after you if anything happened to her, and I keep my promises." "Grandma asked you to look after me?" "She did. About 2 months ago, when she knew she didn't have much time left. She was worried about you, Emma. Worried about how your parents treated you. She wanted to make sure someone would be there for you." I started crying, and Margaret held me while I sobbed for Grandma, for the funeral she deserved but didn't get, and for the parents who'd chosen a vacation over grieving. That week with Margaret changed my life. She told me stories about Grandma I'd never heard, about her strength during the hardest years, her quiet acts of generosity, and her fierce protection of her children despite having so little. "Your grandmother was remarkable," Margaret said one evening over tea. "She never had much money, but she was rich in the ways that mattered, and she loved you so much, Emma. You were her pride and joy." "I loved her too," I whispered. "I know you did, and she knew it too." When my parents returned from their cruise, tanned, relaxed, and full of stories about buffets and excursions, they barely acknowledged I'd been gone. "Did you behave yourself at Margaret's?" Mom asked. "Yes, good, back to normal now." But nothing was normal. I couldn't look at my parents the same way after they'd abandoned me at Grandma's funeral. Every interaction was colored by the knowledge that they'd prioritized a vacation over saying goodbye to the woman who raised them. I started spending more time at Margaret's house. She never minded. In fact, she encouraged it. We'd have dinner together, work on sewing projects she'd learned from Grandma, and talk about books, life, and dreams. "You're always welcome here," she told me. "This is your second home." It became my first home. My real home, the place where I felt valued. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Your support means everything. 6 months after Grandma's funeral, things came to a head. My parents had been arguing constantly about money. They'd overspent on the cruise and other luxuries and were behind on bills. The stress made them even more insufferable than usual. One night they sat me down for a family meeting. "Emma, we need to discuss your future," Dad said in his serious business voice. "Your mother and I are facing some financial pressures right now. We need to cut expenses." "Okay," I said slowly, not sure where this was going. "Amber is heading to college next year, and that's going to be expensive. We need to prioritize her education, so we've made a decision. You're going to go live with Margaret." I blinked. "What?" "Margaret offered to take you in," Mom said. "She has plenty of space and she clearly enjoys your company. It makes sense for everyone. We can focus on Amber's needs and you can be somewhere you're obviously more comfortable." They were giving me away. 6 months after abandoning me at Grandma's funeral, they were literally giving me away to reduce their expenses. I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt relieved. "Okay," I said. They looked surprised that I'd agreed so easily. "We'll still see you," Dad said awkwardly. "Holidays and such. This isn't abandonment, it's just a practical arrangement." "Sure," I said. "Can I go pack?" The legal arrangements were surprisingly simple. Margaret was already a registered foster parent. She'd fostered several children over the years, so the paperwork went through quickly. My parents signed away custody without hesitation, and by my 15th birthday, I was officially living with Margaret full-time. My parents visited twice in the first year, then once the next year, then not at all. Amber went to college and rarely came home. When she did, she didn't visit me at Margaret's. I was alone with my biological family, but I wasn't lonely because I had Margaret. Margaret became the mother I'd never had. She encouraged my education, supported my interests, and made me feel like I mattered. She worked as a retired accountant who did consulting work from home, so she was always available when I needed her. "What do you want to be, Emma?" she asked me one evening when I was 16. "I don't know, something that helps people, I think." "Your grandmother wanted to be a nurse," Margaret said, "but she never got the chance. Had to drop out of school to work when her own mother died. She would have been brilliant at it." "Really? I never knew that. She had dreams just like you do. Don't let anything stop you from achieving yours." Under Margaret's guidance, I flourished. My grades improved from BS to straight A's. I joined clubs, made friends, and discovered a passion for social work. Margaret paid for SAT prep courses, college application fees, and everything I needed. "I can't afford all this," I protested when she insisted on hiring a college counselor. "Yes, you can," Margaret said firmly. "Your grandmother left me something in her will specifically for your education. She wanted to make sure you had opportunities. We're using that money exactly as she intended." I got into Boston University's social work program with a partial scholarship. Margaret covered the rest without hesitation. During my 4 years there, she visited regularly, called weekly, and made sure I knew I was loved. My biological parents didn't call once during college, didn't ask how I was doing, and didn't acknowledge my graduation. I stopped expecting anything from them. After getting my bachelor's degree, I was accepted into BU's master's program in social work with a focus on child welfare. I wanted to help kids like me, kids whose parents failed them, who needed someone to step up and care. Margaret was at my master's graduation, crying and cheering louder than anyone. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she whispered, hugging me tight. "I wish she could have seen this," I said. "She sees it, sweetheart. I know she does." I got a job at a nonprofit in Portland working with foster youth, helping them navigate the system, advocating for their needs, and connecting them with resources. The work was hard but meaningful. I was living the life Grandma Rose would have wanted for me. Margaret was 83 now, still sharp and active, still my rock. We had dinner together every Sunday, keeping up the tradition I'd started with Grandma. Then, on a Tuesday morning when I was 27, I got a call from Margaret's attorney. "Miss Morrison, this is James Chin from Chin and Associates. I'm calling regarding Margaret Hanson's estate." My blood went cold. "Is Margaret okay?" "I'm very sorry to inform you that Miss Hanson passed away peacefully in her sleep last night. She had a heart attack. I'm told it was quick and painless." The world stopped. Margaret gone, just like that. No, I whispered. No, that can't be right. I just saw her Sunday. She was fine. I'm very sorry for your loss. Miss Hanson was a remarkable woman. She left very specific instructions for her estate. And as her attorney, I need to inform you that you're named as a beneficiary. There will be a formal reading of the will next Tuesday at 2 p.m. at my office. Your presence is required. Okay, I said numbly. Ms. Morrison, I should also inform you that we've contacted your parents and your sister. They've been named in the will as well, and will be in attendance. My parents? Why would Margaret leave them anything? I can't discuss the details over the phone. Everything will be explained at the reading. Again, my sincere condolences. He hung up. I sat in my office, staring at the wall, trying to process that Margaret was gone. The woman who'd raised me, saved me, and loved me unconditionally. Gone. I barely functioned for the next week. I arranged Margaret's funeral, choosing a beautiful service at the same church where we'd buried Grandma Rose. I spoke about Margaret's kindness, her generosity, her impact on my life, and the lives of dozens of foster children she'd helped over the years. My parents didn't attend the funeral. Neither did Amber. They were waiting for the will reading instead. Tuesday arrived. I dressed in a simple black dress and drove to Chin & Associates, a small law firm in downtown Portland. The office was elegant but understated, exactly the kind of place Margaret would have chosen. I arrived 15 minutes early and was shown to a conference room. And there they were, my parents and Amber, already seated, looking expectant. I hadn't seen them in person in over 10 years. Dad had aged considerably, thinner, grayer, more worn. Mom looked harder, brittle with too much makeup trying to hide the years. Amber was 30 now, wearing an expensive-looking suit that screamed try-hard corporate climber. Emma, Dad said, standing awkwardly. You look well. Thank you. We were sorry to hear about Margaret, Mom added, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. She was quite fond of you. I didn't respond. I just took a seat across from them and waited. James Chin entered, carrying a thick folder. He was a small, precise man in his 50s with kind eyes. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time. Let's begin. He opened the folder and pulled out the will. Margaret Ann Hanson's last will and testament, executed on March 15th of this year. Miss Hanson was very specific about her wishes, and I'm here to ensure they're carried out exactly as she intended. He began reading the standard legal language, sound mind, revocation of previous wills, etc. My parents were leaning forward, attentive. They clearly expected to receive something substantial. First, to my dear friend Rose Morrison's son, Martin Morrison, and his wife, Christine, I leave the following. A complete accounting of every dollar they cost rose through their selfishness and neglect. My parents froze. Dad's face flushed red. What? James Chin pulled out several pages of itemized documents. Miss Hanson documented every instance where you borrowed money from your mother, Rose, and never repaid it. The total comes to $127,000 over a 30-year period. She also documented the care costs Rose paid out of pocket for your children, Emma and Amber, totaling another $43,000. Miss Hanson wanted you to understand exactly how much Rose sacrificed for you while you treated her like an ATM. He slid the documents across the table. Dad grabbed them, scanning frantically. This is ridiculous, Mom sputtered. She can't. There's more, James continued. To Martin and Christine Morrison, I also leave this message which Miss Hanson recorded in her own words. You abandoned your daughter at your mother's funeral to take a cruise. You prioritized your comfort over saying goodbye to the woman who sacrificed everything for you. You gave Emma away like she was a burden, instead of a blessing. You are the worst kind of parents. The kind who see children as accessories or inconveniences rather than human beings deserving of love. I hope this knowledge haunts you. The room was silent. Dad's mouth was literally hanging open. Mom had gone pale. Additionally, James said, Miss Hanson established a $50,000 fund specifically for grief counseling and family therapy, should Emma ever choose to pursue reconciliation with you. She doubted you'd take advantage of it, but she wanted the option available. This fund will remain in trust for 5 years, after which it will revert to Emma. He moved on before my parents could respond. To Amber Morrison, I leave my collection of first edition books, valued at approximately $15,000, with the hope that you might read them and learn something about compassion and family loyalty. Amber looked confused. That's it? Books? Yes. Miss Hanson felt strongly that material wealth given to those who don't appreciate it is wasted. She hoped the books might provide some value to your life, though she had her doubts. James turned to me, and his expression softened. And now, to Emma Catherine Morrison, whom I have loved as a daughter for 13 years, I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes my home at 428 Maple Street, valued at $680,000. My investment portfolio currently valued at $3.2 million. My savings accounts totaling $1.4 million. My retirement accounts valued at $2.8 million. And various other assets, including vehicles, jewelry, and personal property, valued collectively at $420,000. The total estate value is approximately $8.5 million. I couldn't breathe. $8.5 million. Additionally, James continued, reading from Margaret's personal letter, Emma, my darling girl, this money represents the life I built and the future I want you to have. Use it to continue your important work, to help children who need advocates, to build the life you deserve. Your grandmother Rose would be so proud of the woman you've become, and so am I. You are the daughter I never had, and you've brought more joy to my life than you'll ever know. Live well, love deeply, and never forget that you are extraordinary. With all my love, Margaret. Tears streamed down my face. James handed me a tissue along with the letter, which was in Margaret's handwriting. My father's mouth was still hanging open, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and rage. This can't be legal, he finally managed. She can't just... We're family. We have a right. You have no rights here, James said firmly. Miss Hanson's will is ironclad. I wrote it myself and ensured it would withstand any challenge. She was of completely sound mind when she executed it. You can contest if you'd like, but you'll lose and waste money on legal fees in the process. $8.5 million, Dad said, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. To her, to the daughter we gave away. The daughter you abandoned, James corrected. Miss Hanson was very clear about that. You didn't give Emma to her like some generous donation. You abandoned your child to save money, and Margaret stepped in to save that child from you. Mom was crying now, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of rage and regret. This isn't fair. We're her parents. You deserve exactly what you got, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. You left me at Grandma's funeral to go on a cruise. You told me she was dead and wouldn't know you were gone. You gave me away at 15 because I was too expensive. You never called during college, never acknowledged my graduation, never cared if I was alive or dead. Margaret deserved this money because she earned it through kindness, love, and showing up. You deserve nothing because you gave nothing. I stood up, holding Margaret's letter to my chest. I'm done here. Mr. Chin, please send me the estate documents. I'll sign whatever needs to be signed. Of course, Miss Morrison. I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard my father's voice. Emma, wait, we should talk about this. We're still family. I kept walking. It took 6 months to settle the estate completely. During that time, my parents tried to contact me 67 times. Calls, emails, texts, even showing up at my work. Each message was some variation of, we made mistakes, but we're still family, and surely Margaret would want you to share with your parents. I blocked them after the first 10 attempts. Amber sent one email. I don't think what Margaret did was fair, but I guess she was closer to you than us. Congrats on the money. I didn't respond. I sold Margaret's house. I couldn't live there without her, and the memories were too painful. I kept some of her belongings, her sewing machine, her recipe box, photos of us together, and the quilt she'd made me. The money went into trust funds and investments managed by a financial advisor. I kept working at the nonprofit. The money didn't change my commitment to helping foster youth. If anything, it strengthened it. I used part of Margaret's inheritance to establish the Rose Morrison and Margaret Hanson Foundation, a nonprofit providing educational scholarships and support services for foster children. The foundation serves 200 kids annually, giving them the opportunities Margaret and Grandma gave me. At the foundation's launch event, I spoke about both women, their strength, their kindness, and their belief that love was action, not obligation. I told the story of being abandoned at my grandmother's funeral and how that abandonment led me to the woman who would raise me with actual love. The local news covered the event. My parents saw it. They sent more messages now, trying to reframe the narrative. We always knew you'd do great things, and your grandmother would be proud. I deleted them all. I am 28 now. The money has been invested wisely and continues to grow. I live comfortably but not extravagantly in a small house near the nonprofit where I work. I'm engaged to a wonderful man who works in education and understands exactly why my chosen family matters more than my biological one. My parents are apparently struggling financially. I heard through distant relatives that Dad's business failed and they're living in a small apartment, surviving on Social Security. They're bitter about the inheritance they believe should have been theirs. I feel nothing hearing this. No satisfaction, no guilt, just nothing. They're strangers who happen to provide DNA. The real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the lesson that family is built through presence, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Grandma Rose taught me that. Margaret proved it. And I'm passing it forward through the foundation, through my work with foster kids, and through building a life based on the values they instilled in me. Sometimes people ask if I regret not sharing the inheritance with my parents, if blood family deserves something just for being related. I don't regret it. Margaret left her money to the person who loved her, honored her, and showed up for her. That wasn't my parents. That was me. They had 13 years to build a relationship with Margaret. They chose not to. They had 13 years to repair their relationship with me. They chose not to. Choices have consequences. They chose cruises and appearances and convenience over love and presence. I chose differently. Margaret's will reflected those choices. If you're reading this and you've been abandoned, given away, or treated as less valuable than your parents' comfort, please hear me. Their failure to love you properly doesn't define your worth. Your value isn't determined by people too selfish to see it. Find your Margaret. Find the person who will step up when your biological family steps away. Build your life with their support and guidance. And when you succeed, honor the people who actually deserved honor. I'm living proof that chosen family is real family, that love is action, not obligation, that showing up matters more than showing up in a DNA test. To Grandma Rose and Margaret, thank you for seeing me when I was invisible to my own parents, for loving me when I felt unlovable, for teaching me that family isn't about biology, it's about showing up consistently and unconditionally. I carry you both with me every single day. The foundation bears your names. The children we help are your legacy, and the life I'm building is proof that your love transformed everything. You gave me the real inheritance, the knowledge that I deserved better than I was getting, and the courage to accept it when someone offered it. Thank you for everything, always.